Not everyone leaves home in the dead of winter, but she had nothing left to hold on to. The December wind howled through the cracks in the parsonage walls, carrying with it the scent of coming snow. Lucy Bellamy sat at her father's old desk, her fingers trembling as she folded the letter that had arrived that morning. The paper crinkled under her touch, each word burned into her memory like a brand. The wedding will proceed as planned, December 20th. The debt must be paid. She was 26 years old, daughter of a widowed minister who died with more debts than prayers answered. The good people of Millbrook had been patient for 6 months after Reverend Bellamy's passing, but patience had limits when money was involved. Walter Langston, merchant and creditor, had offered a solution that the town elders deemed generous. Marry the girl. Clear the debt. Lucy stood, her worn dress rustling against the floorboards. Through the frost-covered window, she could see the church where her father had preached about mercy and redemption, where she'd sat every Sunday, believing in providence and purpose, where tomorrow she was meant to promise herself to a man older than her father had been. The house felt smaller with each passing hour. Every corner held a ghost her mother's rocking chair, still creaking in the wind. Her father's Bible, pages yellowed and corners soft from use. But ghosts couldn't pay debts, and prayers hadn't stopped the collectors from coming. Lucy moved to her room, pulling out the small leather satchel hidden beneath loose floorboards. Inside lay her mother's silver brush, sold long ago to buy medicine for father's final illness. What remained was a small cloth purse, heavy with coins her father had hidden away for emergencies. He'd said, if this wasn't an emergency, nothing was. She packed quickly, methodically. 2 dresses, her mother's shawl, a pair of sturdy boots that had seen better days. Her hands paused over the family Bible, then left it on the nightstand. Some burdens were too heavy to carry. The memory came unbidden as she tied the satchel closed. 3 years ago, on the road to Cedar Falls, bandits had stopped the stage, demanding valuables from passengers. She'd been returning from visiting her aunt, carrying nothing but dried flowers for her mother's grave, when one of the outlaws had grabbed her wrist, insisting she must have something hidden. A stranger had intervened. Cole Thorne, that was the name he'd given after the sheriff arrived. Tall, weathered, with a scar across his left cheek that made him look dangerous until you saw the kindness in his eyes. He'd stayed with her until she felt safe, bought her dinner at the way station, and listened to her talk about her father's work without the glazed expression most men wore when women spoke of such things. If you ever find yourself with nowhere to go, he'd said as they parted ways, come to Dry Hollow. I'll be there. She'd laughed then, assured him she had a good home, a place in the world. How young she'd been, how certain that life would continue as it always had. Now, Lucy pulled on her traveling cloak and bonnet, careful to pin her hair so the wind wouldn't catch it. The stage left at 4 the last one of the day, heading west. She'd bought the ticket yesterday, telling the station master she was visiting distant relatives. Let him spread that story if anyone asked. The house groaned around her as she made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she left a note on the table where Walter would find it tomorrow when he came calling in his Sunday best, expecting a bride. I choose my own path. The house and its contents are yours in lieu of the debt. L.B. No apologies, no explanations. Let them make of it what they would. The wind struck her full force as she stepped outside, nearly stealing her breath. Snow had begun to fall, fat flakes that would cover her footprints before morning. She pulled the cloak tighter and set off toward town, keeping to the shadows, though few would be out in such weather. The stage sat waiting outside Morrison's general store, the horses stamping and blowing steam in the cold air. The driver, a grizzled man named Emmett, looked surprised to see her. Evening service was canceled on account of the weather. Miss Bellamy. I'm not going to church. She handed him her ticket. I'm going to Dry Hollow. His eyebrows rose. That's a far piece for a lady traveling alone. 3 days if the weather holds, longer if it don't. I'm aware. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her determined stance, the satchel clutched in her hands. Whatever he saw in her face made him nod slowly. Well then, let's get you settled. We've got 2 other passengers, but they'll leave you be if you want it that way. Lucy climbed into the coach, choosing the corner seat that faced backward. She didn't want to see where she was going, only what she was leaving behind. The other passengers, a drummer selling patent medicines, and a woman who might have been his wife, or might have been something else, barely glanced at her. As the stage lurched into motion, Lucy allowed herself one look back. The church steeple rose above the snow-covered roofs, a dark finger pointing toward heaven. Somewhere in one of those houses. Walter Langston was probably sampling wine for tomorrow's wedding feast. The thought should have brought guilt, but all she felt was a wild, fierce joy. Let them call her a runaway. Let them say she'd brought shame on her father's memory. She was choosing something else, uncertainty over surrender, the unknown over the unbearable. Maybe Cole Thorne wouldn't remember her. Maybe Dry Hollow would be no better than what she'd left. But it would be her choice, her consequences to bear. The wheels creaked and groaned over the frozen road, carrying her west into the gathering dark. Snow swirled past the windows, erasing the world behind them. Lucy closed her eyes and tried to remember Cole Thorne's face, the steady way he'd looked at her, the promise in his words. If you ever find yourself with nowhere to go, come to Dry Hollow. She pressed her hand against the purse of coins hidden in her skirts. It wasn't much, but it would get her there. After that, she'd face whatever came. One choice at a time, one day at a time. The way her mother had taught her to darn stockings stitch by stitch until the hole was mended or the fabric gave way entirely. The coach rolled on through the night, and Lucy Bellamy left her old life behind with each turn of the wheels. Somewhere ahead lay Dry Hollow, a man who might or might not remember a promise, and a future she couldn't imagine. But it was hers to discover, hers to claim or lose. And that, she thought as sleep finally took her, was better than any certainty built on someone else's choices. The stage rolled into Dry Hollow just as the last light bled from the sky, painting the desert sand the color of old blood. Lucy's bones ached from 3 days of constant motion. Her dress was gray with dust, and her hair had long since escaped its careful pins. She peered through the grimy window at the town that would be her salvation or her folly. Dry Hollow sprawled along a single main street, buildings hunched against the endless wind like old men sharing secrets. Even in the dying light, she could see the town wore its hard years openly weathered wood, patched roofs, and windows that squinted suspiciously at newcomers. The December cold here was different from home, dry and sharp as broken glass. "End of the line, miss," Emmett called down, already throwing luggage from the roof. "Watch your step." Lucy gathered her satchel and climbed down, her legs trembling from exhaustion and something else fear, perhaps, or the weight of burned bridges. The other passengers had left at earlier stops, leaving her to face this moment alone. The stage had stopped in front of what appeared to be the town's only hotel, a 2-story building with "Silver Dollar" painted in fading letters across its face. A few men lounged on the porch, passing a bottle and watching her with the lazy interest of those who'd seen too many strangers come and go. No one stepped forward. No familiar face emerged from the shadows. The promise that had carried her across 300 miles suddenly felt as substantial as dust. "You waiting for someone?" Emmett asked, setting her small trunk on the ground with surprising gentleness. Yes, Cole Thorne. Do you know where I might find him?" The men on the porch exchanged glances. One of them, a fellow with tobacco-stained whiskers, spat into the street. "Thorne keeps to himself out at the horse ranch. Don't come to town much, especially not after dark." Lucy's heart sank. Of course he wouldn't be here. Why had she expected him to somehow know she was coming? The foolishness of her plan struck her with brutal clarity. "Thank you," she managed, lifting her trunk with both hands. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it contained the weight of every mistake she'd made. She started down the street, unsure where she was going but needing to move. To not stand there like lost livestock. The few people still out stared openly at her dusty traveling dress, her city boots already scuffed and worn, at the way she held herself like she was trying not to break. Whispers followed her like tumbleweeds. Another runaway. Probably got family troubles. Pretty thing, but that won't last long out here. Lucy kept walking, past the saloon where piano music and rough laughter spilled into the night, past the general store with its bolted doors, past the barber shop and the undertakers, how fitting they stood side by side. Her arms burned from carrying the trunk, but she wouldn't put it down, wouldn't show that weakness. "You need something, honey." The voice came from her left. A woman stood in the doorway of a small restaurant, arms crossed over an apron that had seen better days. She was perhaps 40, with skin burnished by sun and wind, black hair streaked with early silver. Her eyes held neither pity nor contempt, just a frank assessment. "I'm looking for lodging," Lucy said, hating how her voice cracked on the words. "That's so. Well, the silver dollar's back that way, but I'm guessing you already saw it and kept walking. Smart girl, that's no place for a lady alone." The woman stepped closer, and Lucy caught the scent of bread and bacon grease. "You got money." Some's better than none. Esther Yazzy's my name. I run this place." She gestured to the restaurant behind her. "Got a room upstairs I sometimes rent. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and the lock works." Lucy nearly sobbed with relief. "How much?" $1 a week. Includes breakfast. Supper's extra if you want it. $1 a week. At that rate, her money would last perhaps 2 months if she was careful. She'd need work, need to find coal, need to make sense of this desperate choice. "I'll take it." Esther nodded and reached for the trunk. "Let me help you with that. You look ready to drop." They climbed narrow stairs at the back of the restaurant, Esther's lamp throwing wild shadows on the walls. The room was as promised small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the backs of buildings toward the desert beyond. "Pumps in the kitchen if you need water. Outhouse is behind the building. I serve breakfast from 6 to 8. Esther set the lamp on the small table. "You running from something or to something?" The directness of the question caught Lucy off guard. "Both, I think." "Honest answer. Well, Dry Hollow's good for both, long as you're willing to work for it." She moved toward the door, then paused. "You said you were looking for lodging, but I'm guessing you were looking for more than that. Someone in particular." "Cole Thorne. He told me once I could come here if I needed to." Esther's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable passing over her features. "Did he now?" "Well, Cole's got his ranch about 3 miles north of town. Keeps good horses, pays fair wages to those who work for him. Doesn't make promises lightly, that one." "You know him." "Everyone knows everyone in a town this size. He comes in for supplies, sometimes brings a horse to sell. Quiet man, decent, which is more than you can say for some around here." She studied Lucy again. "You planning to head out there tonight?" No, I suppose I'll go in the morning." "Smarter plan. Get some rest first. You look like you've come a long way." After Esther left, Lucy sank onto the bed, not bothering to undress. Through the thin walls, she could hear life continuing below the clatter of dishes, low conversation, a door banging shut, the sounds of a place that existed without her, that would continue existing whether she stayed or left. She thought of her father's house, probably already being inventoried by Walter's men. Thought of the wedding dress hanging in Mrs. Morrison's shop, white silk that would go to waste. Thought of the scandal that must be racing through Millbrook like wildfire. Here, she was nobody. A dusty woman with a small trunk and smaller prospects. The anonymity should have been freeing, but it sat on her chest like stones. What if Cole didn't remember her? What if he did remember but hadn't meant the offer? What if he'd moved on, married, built a life that had no room for desperate women fleeing their past? She'd gambled everything on a moment's kindness 3 years gone. Lucy forced herself to rise, to pour water from the pitcher Esther had left and wash the worst of the travel from her face and hands. In the small mirror above the washstand, a stranger looked back hollow-eyed, sunburned, her carefully maintained prettiness worn down to something harder. Maybe that was better. Pretty things didn't last in places like this. She lay back down fully clothed, too tired to care about propriety. Tomorrow she would walk 3 miles in desert sun to find a man who might not want to be found. Tomorrow she would know if her great escape had been courage or foolishness. But tonight, in this small room above a restaurant in a town that didn't care who she'd been, Lucy Bellamy closed her eyes and let the tears come. They rolled down her temples into her dusty hair, silent as the desert wind that rattled the window and whispered of all the ways a person could disappear. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled lonely, defiant, free. Lucy pressed her fist to her mouth to muffle her own answering cry, then turned her face to the wall and waited for morning to come and show her what she'd done. Dawn came like a reluctant promise, painting the desert in shades of pink and gold. Lucy had barely slept, her mind churning through doubts and possibilities until they tangled into knots. She rose before the sun fully cleared the horizon, washed with the last of the water, and tried to make herself presentable. Her best dress was wrinkled but clean, a deep blue that her father had said matched her eyes. She pinned her hair carefully, though the desert air was already making it rebel. Looking in the mirror, she saw a woman trying too hard to appear composed. Well, it would have to do. Esther was already in the kitchen when Lucy came downstairs, kneading bread with practiced efficiency. "Coffee's hot," she said without looking up. "Biscuits are on the stove. You heading out to the Thorn place?" "Yes." "It's a fair walk. Sun gets mean by midday, even in December." Esther finally looked at her, taking in the dress, the carefully pinned hair. "You might want to borrow my old bonnet. That pretty skin of yours won't last a season out here without protection." Lucy accepted the bonnet gratefully, along with directions to Cole's ranch. North out of town, past the cemetery, follow the wagon road until it forked. Take the left path toward the Red Rocks. "Can't miss it," Esther assured her. "Only horse ranch out that way." The town looked different in daylight, less menacing but more worn. Paint peeled from buildings like sunburned skin, and dust coated everything with fine persistence. A few people were out, mostly men heading to work, and they watched her pass with the same frank curiosity as the night before. Lucy kept her head high and her pace steady until the last building fell behind. Then the desert opened before her, vast and indifferent, and she felt suddenly terrifyingly small. The road was hard-packed dirt, marked by wagon wheels and hoof prints. She walked steadily, her boots made for city streets already rubbing blisters. The sun climbed higher, and despite the December date, sweat gathered under her collar. An hour passed, then another. The fork appeared as promised, and she turned left toward a line of red rocks that seemed to shimmer in the heat. Her throat was dry as paper, and she wished she'd thought to bring water. Just when she thought she must have taken the wrong path, she saw it a cluster of buildings nestled against a rise, corrals spreading out like wooden webs. Horses moved in the paddocks, their coats gleaming in the sun. Smoke rose from a chimney, and somewhere a dog barked. Lucy stopped at the gate, her courage suddenly failing. What was she doing here? What right did she have to appear on this man's doorstep, claiming a promise made in passing 3 years ago? Before she could decide whether to advance or retreat, the dog's barking brought results. A figure emerged from the barn, moving with the easy stride of someone comfortable in their own skin. Even at a distance, she knew him. Cole Thorne looked much as she remembered, tall, lean, with the kind of stillness that made other men seem fidgety. The scar on his cheek caught the light as he turned toward her. He wore work clothes, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hands dirty from whatever task she'd interrupted. He stopped about 10 feet away, and they regarded each other across the dusty yard. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes brown as the desert earth took in everything: her city dress, her borrowed bonnet, the way she gripped the gatepost like it might hold her upright. "Miss Bellamy," he said finally. Not a question. Mr. Thorne." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You said once that if I had nowhere else to go." "I remember." Silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of horses and wind. Then he moved forward, unlatching the gate with one smooth motion. "You'd better come in. You look ready to fall over." She followed him across the yard, past curious horses that watched from their corrals, past a well with a pump that made her mouth water, to a modest house built of adobe and wood. The inside was cool and dim, sparse but clean. He gestured to a chair at a rough-hewn table, then went to pour water from a pitcher. "Drink," he said, setting the glass before her. Slowly. The water was cool and sweet, better than anything she'd ever tasted. She made herself sip, aware of his eyes on her, of the questions he wasn't asking. "You really came," he said finally, leaning against the counter. "When I heard there was a woman asking after me in town, I wondered, but I didn't think that I'd actually be desperate enough." A smile ghosted across his face, there and gone. "That's not what I was going to say." "What then?" "I didn't think you'd remember. City women don't usually recall chance meetings with ranch hands." "You weren't just a ranch hand. You saved me from those bandits." "I showed up. The sheriff did the saving." She set down the glass, meeting his eyes. "You stayed with me after. You bought me dinner. You listened. And you made an offer I chose to believe was genuine." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It was genuine. But I need to know what you're running from. Miss Bellamy, this isn't an easy place, and it's harder on those carrying heavy loads." So she told him about her father's death, the debts, Walter Langston and his solution, about choosing the unknown over the unbearable. He listened without interrupting, his face giving away little. "So you gave up everything to avoid marrying a man old enough to be your father." He summarized when she finished. "I gave up everything to keep the right to choose," she corrected. Something shifted in his expression then. A recognition, perhaps? "Fair enough. What are your plans now?" I don't have any. I have some money, enough for a few weeks' lodging in town. I need work, I suppose." "Can you cook?" "Passably." "So, yes. Know anything about horses?" "No." "Willing to learn?" She blinked. Yes." He pushed away from the counter, moving to look out the window at his domain. "I've been managing alone, but the ranch is growing. Could use help with meals, mending, general upkeep. Can't pay much $1 a week plus board. There's a small room off the kitchen, nothing fancy but private. You'd eat what I eat. Work is needed. It's hard living. Miss Bellamy. Nothing like what you're used to." Lucy's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you offering me employment?" "I'm offering you a chance, same as you offered yourself when you got on that stage." He turned back to her. "But understand, this folks will talk. A woman living out here, working for an unmarried man. Your reputation, what's left of it, won't survive." "My reputation is already destroyed. I ran from my own wedding. This is different. Back there, you're a scandal that will fade when the next one comes along. Here, you'll be branded, the kind of woman who lives with a man without marriage. Some doors won't open for you." Lucy thought of the whispers in town, the assessing looks. Then she thought of Walter Langston's soft hands and softer promises, of a life measured in account books and appropriate smiles. "I'll take it," she said. "The job, if you'll have me." Cole studied her for another long moment, and she had the feeling he was seeing past her careful presentation to the desperation underneath. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him. "Then welcome to the Double T Ranch, Miss Bellamy. When can you start?" "Today, if you'll fetch my trunk from town." That almost smile appeared again. "Eager to burn those bridges?" "They're already ash. Might as well see what grows in their place." He nodded and moved toward the door. "I'll hitch the wagon. You can rest here. Look around. The kitchen's through there. You might want to see what you're working with." After he left, Lucy sat in the quiet house, trying to absorb what had just happened. She'd found him. He'd remembered. He'd offered her not charity but work, not pity but possibility. It was more than she'd dared hope and less than she'd dreamed. But it was real. She stood on shaky legs and went to explore the kitchen. It was basic but functional, with a good stove and plenty of shelves. The room he'd mentioned was indeed small, barely larger than a closet, but it had a window and a door that closed. Privacy, safety, a chance to figure out who Lucy Bellamy was when she wasn't anyone's daughter. Anyone's intended. Anyone's responsibility but her own. Through the window, she watched Cole harness horses with economical movements, his hands sure and gentle. He'd asked what she was running from, but hadn't asked what she was running to. Maybe because he understood that sometimes the running itself was the point, the choice to move, to risk, to reach for something undefined rather than accept something unbearable. The sun climbed higher, flooding the small room with light. Somewhere a horse whinnied, and Cole's low voice answered. Lucy unpinned the borrowed bonnet and set it on the narrow bed. Tomorrow she would start learning this new life. But for now, for just this moment, she closed her eyes and let herself believe she'd made the right choice. The rooster's crow came like a rusty gate at 4:30, just as it had every morning for the past 2 weeks. Lucy's eyes opened instantly. Her body had learned the ranch's rhythm faster than her mind. She dressed in the dark, her fingers finding the simple work dress and apron without need for light. No more blue silk or careful pins. Out here, pretty was a luxury she couldn't afford. The kitchen was cold, the stove dead from the night. She built the fire with practiced movements, kindling first, then larger pieces, coaxing life from embers with patient breath. 2 weeks ago, she'd nearly cried when the smoke backed up and filled the room. Now her hands knew exactly how the damper liked to sit. Coffee first. Cole would be up with the rooster, and he expected coffee black as midnight and strong enough to float a horseshoe. Then biscuits, bacon, whatever else would fuel a man through a day of breaking horses and mending fences. She'd learned he ate with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything else. No complaints, no compliments, just steady consumption of whatever she put before him. By the time he appeared in the doorway, she had breakfast ready. He nodded his version of good morning and sat at the table. They'd developed a routine of comfortable silence, broken only by necessary communication. "Need supplies from town today," he said between bites. "You want to come?" Lucy's hand stilled on the dish rag. She hadn't been to town since arriving, hadn't faced the stares and whispers that surely waited. But they were low on flour, and she needed thread for mending. "Yes," she said, surprised by her own firmness. After breakfast, she cleaned the kitchen while Cole tended the horses. Through the window, she watched him work. He moved among the animals like water, never hurried, never harsh. The horses responded to something in him that went deeper than training a quiet authority that asked rather than demanded. At first, she'd been terrified of the beasts. Now she could walk past the corrals without flinching, though she still gave the stallion a wide berth. Cole had started teaching her basics: how to approach slowly, where to touch, how to read their moods in the set of their ears and the white of their eyes. "Ready?" Cole appeared at the door, hat in hand. Lucy untied her apron and reached for the bonnet Esther had given her. Her hands were already rougher than they'd been 2 weeks ago, small cuts and calluses marking her transformation from minister's daughter to ranch hand. She pulled on her gloves to hide them, a last vanity she couldn't quite surrender. The wagon ride to town passed in typical silence. Lucy had learned that Cole's quiet wasn't uncomfortable or angry. it was simply his natural state. When he did speak, his words carried weight, chosen carefully as coins spent dear. "There'll be talk," he said as the first buildings appeared, "about you living out at the ranch." "I know. Might be some folks won't be friendly." "I expected that." He glanced at her, something like approval in his eyes. "Just so you're prepared." Dry Hollow looked exactly as she'd left it, dusty, worn, stubborn in its existence. But Lucy felt the change in how it looked at her. Before, she'd been a curiosity. Now she was something else, the woman living in sin at the Thorn Ranch. Cole pulled up at the general store. "I'll load feed. You get what you need inside." The store was dim and cluttered, smelling of pickle brine and leather. Mr. Jameson, the proprietor, looked up from his ledger. His expression went from welcome to wariness when he recognized her. "Miss Bellamy, isn't it?" "Yes, I need flour, sugar, thread, and coffee." She kept her voice steady, businesslike. He gathered her items slowly, as if hoping she might disappear if he took long enough. Other customers entered. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, a ranch hand she didn't recognize. Both stared openly. Mrs. Patterson sniffed and turned her back, examining bolts of fabric with sudden intensity. "That'll be $3.40, Jameson said, louder than necessary. Lucy paid without comment, aware of every eye in the store, as she gathered her purchases. Mrs. Patterson's voice carried clearly across the space. "Some women have no shame at all, living with a man, bold as brass. Her poor father must be rolling in his grave." Heat flooded Lucy's cheeks, but she kept her chin high. "At the door, she nearly collided with Esther Yazzie." "Steady there," Esther said, catching her elbow. Her dark eyes flicked to Mrs. Patterson, then back to Lucy. "Getting supplies?" "Yes." "Good. A woman needs to take care of her household." Esther's voice carried just as clearly as Mrs. Patterson's had. Nothing wrong with honest work, no matter what jealous biddies might chirp. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed purple. Esther smiled serenely and swept into the store, leaving Lucy standing in the doorway with something warm blooming in her chest. Outside, Cole was loading sacks of grain. A group of men loitered near the wagon, and Lucy caught the tail end of their conversation. "I must be mighty convenient, having help like that." "Help? That what they're calling it now?" Cole's movements never faltered, but Lucy saw the tension in his shoulders. She climbed onto the wagon seat, arranging her skirts with deliberate calm. "Got everything?" Cole asked, swinging up beside her. "Yes." He clicked to the horses, and they pulled away. Behind them, laughter followed like dust. The ride back was heavier with silence. Lucy wanted to apologize, to acknowledge the burden her presence brought him, but the words tangled on her tongue. Instead, she watched the desert roll past and wondered if respectability was a price too high for freedom. "They're fools," Cole said suddenly. She turned, startled. "Those men, Mrs. Patterson, all of them." His hands were tight on the reins. "They see what they want to see. They see truly enough, I am living with you, unmarried. You're working for me. There's a difference." "Not to them." He was quiet again until they reached the ranch. As he helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingered briefly on her waist. "I knew what I was doing when I offered you the job," he said. "The talk doesn't bother me. But if it bothers you—" "It doesn't." The lie came quick and fierce. "Let them talk." That afternoon, she attacked her chores with violent energy, scrubbed the floors until her knuckles bled, beat the rugs until dust clouds made her cough, mended shirts with stitches tight as her jaw. When Cole came in for supper, he took one look at her raw hands and fetched salve from the cupboard. "Sit," he ordered. She sat. He took her hands in his, turning them palm up. His own hands were calloused but gentle as he worked the salve into her abraded skin. "This won't get easier," he said quietly. "The work or the talk." "I know." "But it does get bearable, like breaking a horse. First days are the hardest. Then you find your seat." Lucy looked at their joined hands, his dark from sun, hers still pale despite the work. "Is that what you're doing, breaking me?" "No." He released her hands, capping the salve. "You came here already broken. I'm just giving you room to mend." The words hung between them, too true for comfort. Lucy flexed her fingers, feeling the sting beneath the salve's coolness. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For the room, for not asking questions, for—" she gestured helplessly. "For treating you like a person instead of a problem." "Yes." He stood, moving to wash his hands. "That's not something you need to thank me for, Miss Bellamy. That's just basic decency." "Lucy," she said impulsively, "if I'm going to ruin my reputation working for you, you might as well call me Lucy." He turned, that almost smile playing at his lips. "All right then, Lucy." The sound of her name in his low voice did something strange to her insides. She busied herself with supper preparations, aware of him settling into his chair with the weekly newspaper from town. This was her life now, cooking for a quiet man, cleaning his house, learning the ways of horses and desert living, wearing plain dresses and ruined hands, being whispered about in town, defended by no one but a restaurant owner who understood what it meant to be different. As she served supper, stew, and cornbread, nothing fancy, she caught Cole watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What?" she asked. "You're tougher than you look. Looks can deceive." "Yes," he agreed. "They can." They ate in companionable silence while outside the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Lucy no longer flinched at the sound. Like everything else in this new life, she was learning to live with wild things. The storm rolled in from the north like a gray wall, bringing the kind of cold rain that cut through clothes and chilled to the bone. Lucy had been working since dawn, trying to finish the week's washing before the weather turned, but the desert sky could change faster than a wild horse's mood, and she found herself racing to pull sheets from the line as the first fat drops began to fall. Thunder cracked overhead, making the horses in the nearest corral dance and whinny. Lucy's fingers fumbled with the clothespins, her hair whipping free from its pins. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes, and her thin work dress offered no protection against the sudden cold. She'd gotten half the washing down when the sky truly opened. Rain fell in sheets, turning the yard to mud in seconds. Lucy grabbed what she could, stumbling toward the house with her arms full of half-dry laundry. That's when she saw the young Mustang. Cole had brought it in 3 days ago, a half-wild thing with a coat like burnished copper. He'd been working to gentle it, spending hours just standing near its pen, letting it learn his scent and presence. Now the horse was rearing against the corral fence, eyes white with terror as lightning split the sky. Without thinking, Lucy dropped the washing and ran toward the corral. The gate had worked loose in the wind, hanging open just enough for a determined horse to push through. If the Mustang escaped into the storm, Cole might never get it back. "Easy," she called, though her voice was lost in the wind. "Easy now." The horse's hooves slipped in the mud as it half-reared again. Lucy reached the gate just as the animal made its decision. Surging forward, she threw her weight against the gate, trying to close it, but the Mustang was stronger. The force knocked her sideways into the churned earth. Cold mud soaked instantly through her dress. She tried to stand, but her boots found no purchase. The world tilted strangely, and she realized with distant surprise that she was shaking not from cold but from something deeper. Exhaustion, perhaps. She'd been pushing hard these past weeks, trying to prove herself worthy of Cole's trust, trying to show the town she could work as hard as any ranch hand. The Mustang was through the gate now, disappearing into the rain. Lucy made one more effort to rise, then felt her strength simply leave, like water poured from a cup. The cold mud didn't feel so bad anymore, almost warm. Really. Lucy? Cole's voice cut through the storm. Then his hands were under her arms, lifting her from the mud with easy strength. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and she was vaguely aware of being carried. "The horse," she mumbled, "got loose." "Forget the damn horse." The world blurred. Next she knew. She was inside, dripping on the kitchen floor. Cole's face swam in and out of focus as he knelt before her, his hands working at the buttons of her sodden dress. "No," she whispered, trying to push his hands away. "Not proper? Proper be damned. You're half frozen." Her fingers were too numb to fight him. He peeled away the wet dress with clinical efficiency, wrapping her in a rough blanket from the chest by the door. Only then did she realize how violently she was shivering. "Can you stand?" She tried, her legs folded like paper. The last thing she remembered was Cole lifting her again, carrying her to her small room, his voice rough with something that might have been fear. "Stay awake, Lucy, stay with me." But the darkness was so inviting, and she was so very tired. She woke to lamplight and the sound of rain on the roof. Her small room felt different, warmer, closer. As her eyes focused, she understood why. Cole sat in the room's only chair, pulled close to her narrow bed. He'd been reading by lamplight, but the book lay forgotten in his lap. "Don't," she whispered. His head came up sharply. "You're awake. Don't watch me sleep." Something flickered across his face, relief, amusement, something else she couldn't name. "Little late for that. You've been out for hours." Lucy tried to sit up, became aware that she wore only her shift under the blankets. Heat flooded her cheeks. My dress was killing you. Body can't warm up wrapped in wet cloth." His voice was matter-of-fact, but she noticed he kept his eyes carefully on her face. "Fever broke an hour ago." "Fever? You pushed too hard? Exhaustion? Cold rain? Not enough food recipe for disaster." His jaw tightened. "I should have been watching closer." "Not your fault. You work for me. That makes you my responsibility." Lucy pulled the blanket higher, acutely aware of his presence in the small space. He looked tired. She realized, dark circles under his eyes, his usually neat shirt rumpled. "Have you been here all night? Where else would I be?" The simple answer made her throat tight. "The Mustang, did it get away? Came back on its own once the storm passed. Turns out it's smarter than both of us." He leaned forward, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Still too warm, but better." His touch was gentle, calloused fingers surprisingly soft against her skin. Lucy closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "Making trouble, being weak. I wanted to prove I could do this." "Lucy." He waited until she opened her eyes. "You've nothing to prove. Not to me, not to anyone. You work harder than any woman I've known, harder than most men, but you're not made of iron." "I need to be—" "No." His hand moved from her forehead to her cheek, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "You need to be human. That means rest when you're tired, food when you're hungry, shelter when storms come. Is that what you are, human?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. "On good days." Lucy felt herself sinking back into the pillows, exhaustion pulling at her again. But she fought it, not wanting him to leave, not wanting to lose this unexpected moment of connection. "Sleep," he said, reading her struggle. "I'll stay. You don't have to watch me all night." "I'm not watching. I'm just being here, in case you need anything." "Cole." "Thank you." He picked up his book again, settling back in the chair. "Rest now. Morning will come soon enough." Lucy let her eyes drift closed, listening to the rain and the soft rustle of turning pages. She'd been so focused on being strong, on proving herself, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for, to have someone stand guard against the darkness. In the morning, she knew things would go back to normal. She'd rise and make breakfast, tend the house, face another day of work and whispers. But tonight, in this lamplit room with the storm dying outside, she allowed herself this gift, the presence of a good man who asked nothing but gave shelter just the same. Still awake, Cole's voice was soft. Almost asleep. Good, dream easy, Lucy. She wanted to tell him that she felt safe, that his presence chased away shadows she hadn't even known she carried. But the words were too large, too revealing. Instead, she let out a long breath and surrendered to sleep, knowing he would keep his word, knowing he would stay. The whispers started as a trickle after the night of the storm. Someone had seen Cole carrying her into the house. Someone else had noticed the doctor wasn't called. By the time Lucy was well enough to return to town for supplies, the trickle had become a flood. Shameless, she heard as she passed the millinery shop. Living in sin came from two women at the well. That poor Thorn boy, taken in by a scheming woman. Lucy kept her head high and her step steady, but each word found its mark. She'd expected judgment, but the reality cut deeper than anticipation. These people didn't know her, didn't know the careful distance she and Cole maintained, didn't know how he'd moved back to sleeping in the barn after that night to avoid any appearance of impropriety. At the general store, Mr. Jameson served her with obvious reluctance, making her wait while he attended to other customers first. The prices he quoted seemed higher than before, though she couldn't prove it. When she questioned the cost of flour, he shrugged. Supply and demand. Miss, take it or leave it. She took it. They needed flour. Outside, she nearly walked into a group of women from the church auxiliary. Mrs. Patterson stood at their center like a general marshaling troops. Miss Bellamy, she said, managing to make the name sound like an accusation. How unexpected to see you in town. I needed supplies, Lucy replied evenly. Of course. One must maintain a household. Mustn't one... Mrs. Patterson's smile was sharp as broken glass. Though I suppose your domestic arrangements are rather unconventional. The other women tittered behind gloved hands. I work for Mr. Thorne, Lucy said. I cook, clean, and mend. Nothing more. Oh, my dear. Mrs. Patterson's voice dripped false sympathy. No one suggesting anything improper, though one must wonder why a respectable woman would choose such an arrangement when surely other options were available. Sometimes respectability is a luxury not everyone can afford. Indeed, how unfortunate that your father isn't here to guide you. He was such a godly man. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her gloves with deliberate precision. I'm sure he would be concerned about your current situation. Lucy felt heat rise in her cheeks. My father taught me the value of honest work and self-reliance. I believe I'm honoring his memory. By living unchaperoned with a bachelor, how modern of you. The confrontation had drawn attention. People stopped their business to watch, eager for drama to break the monotony of their day. Lucy recognized the trap, defend herself too vigorously and seem guilty, remain silent and seem ashamed. Judge not, she said quietly, lest ye be judged. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. How dare you quote scripture at me? You! Is there a problem here? Esther Yazzie appeared at Lucy's elbow as if conjured from dust. She carried a marketing basket and wore an expression of polite interest that didn't quite mask the steel beneath. No problem, Mrs. Patterson said stiffly. We were simply expressing concern for Miss Bellamy's welfare. How Christian of you, Esther said dryly, though I seem to recall something about minding the beam in one's own eye before worrying about specks in others. Mrs. Patterson's flush deepened. I don't believe anyone asked for your input, Mrs. Yazzie. No, but I'm generous that way. Esther linked her arm through Lucy's. Come, dear. I need your opinion on fabric for new curtains. She steered Lucy away from the group, maintaining a steady stream of chatter about curtains that neither of them cared about until they were out of earshot. Breathe, Esther murmured. You look ready to faint or fight, and neither will help. I can't do this, Lucy whispered. Every time I come to town, it gets worse. Course it does. You're their favorite entertainment. Esther guided her into the relative quiet of her restaurant. Sit. I'll make tea. The restaurant was empty in the late morning lull. Lucy sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had drained her more than a full day's work. Esther returned with tea and a plate of cornbread. Eat. You're too thin. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Spite needs fuel. Despite everything, Lucy almost smiled. She broke off a piece of cornbread, finding comfort in its familiar texture. They're not entirely wrong, she said quietly, about my situation being improper. Proper according to who misses. Patterson and her flock of geese. Esther snorted. That woman's been trying to marry off her horse-faced daughter for 3 years? She's just mad Colethorne never gave the girl a second look. It's not just her, the whole town. The whole town can hang. Esther leaned forward. You listen to me, girl. I've lived here 15 years. Came as a widow with a half-Apache baby and no family to speak of. You think they welcomed me with open arms? Lucy studied the older woman's face, seeing new lines in its weathered beauty. They called me worse than what they're calling you. Esther continued. Said I was a disgrace, that my boy would grow up wild, that no decent person should associate with us. But I stayed, worked hard, fed people good food at fair prices. And you know what? Half those righteous women sneak in here when they need my remedy for their husband's drinking or my herbs for their women's troubles. How did you stand it? By remembering that their opinions didn't pay my bills or feed my son. By knowing my own worth regardless of their measure. Esther refilled Lucy's cup. You're not doing anything shameful. Lucy, you're surviving. And if that threatens them, that's their problem to solve. The bell above the door chimed. Cole stood in the entrance, hat in hand, looking between them with concern. Saw your wagon outside, he said to Lucy. Everything all right? Fine, Lucy said quickly. She was being ambushed by the moral guardians of Dry Hollow, Esther interrupted. I performed a rescue. Cole's expression darkened. Who? It doesn't matter. Lucy said, It does to me. No. She stood, gathering her parcels. I won't have you fighting my battles. That would only make things worse. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Your choice. But Lucy, you don't have to come to town alone. I can hide behind you. Let them think I need protection. She shook her head. Thank you, but no, I need to face this myself. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Understood. You ready to head back? Yes. She thanked Esther and followed Cole out to where their wagons waited. He helped her up, his hands lingering a moment on her waist. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I'm sorry. This isn't what I intended when I offered you the job. I know. She looked down at him. This good man who slept in his barn to protect what remained of her reputation. But I'm not sorry. Whatever they say, whatever they think, I'm not sorry I'm here. He squeezed her hand briefly, then moved to his own wagon. They drove back to the ranch in separate vehicles, maintaining the fiction of propriety. But Lucy felt the connection between them, strong as any rope, invisible as desert wind. Let the town talk, she thought. Let them whisper and judge and condemn. She had work to do, a life to build, and a man who saw her worth beyond their narrow measures. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but increasingly, she couldn't imagine wanting any other. The black carriage arrived on a Tuesday. incongruous as a crow among sparrows against the dusty landscape of Dry Hollow. Lucy saw it from the kitchen window where she was kneading bread, her hands stilling in the dough. No one in town owned such a vehicle, polished wood and brass fittings, pulled by matched grays that had never known a plow's harness. Her heart knew before her mind accepted it. Walter had come. Cole was in the far pasture working with a yearling. She could see his distant figure, patient and steady as always. For a wild moment, she considered running to him, but pride held her feet. She'd face this herself. By the time the carriage stopped at the ranch gate, Lucy had wiped her hands clean and removed her apron. She stepped onto the porch as Walter Langston descended, assisted by his driver. He looked exactly as she remembered, soft around the middle, carefully groomed, wearing clothes that cost more than most people in Dry Hollow saw in a year. "Lucy!" He removed his hat, revealing hair gone thinner in the months since she'd seen him. "You look different." "Mr. Langston," she kept her voice steady, though her pulse hammered like hoofbeats. "You're far from home." "As are you." His pale eyes took in her simple dress, her work-roughened hands, the modest ranch buildings behind her. "Is this what you ran to, this wilderness?" "This is where I chose to be." "Chose?" He said the word like it tasted bitter. "You chose to humiliate me, to break a legal engagement, to flee like a thief in the night, leaving me to face the scandal. I left the house and its contents as payment for the debt. You lost nothing." "Nothing." Color rose in his doughy cheeks. "I lost my bride, my reputation, the respect of the community. Do you have any idea what you put me through?" Lucy lifted her chin. "I imagine it was uncomfortable, being denied something you believed was owed to you. You were promised to me. Your father." "My father is dead, and I was promised to no one. I am not property to be transferred for debt." Walter's face darkened. "The law says otherwise, which is why I've come." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "This is a legal writ, sworn before a judge. You abandoned a binding engagement contract. You owe me compensation for breach of promise." Lucy took the paper with numb fingers. The legal language swam before her eyes, but the meaning was clear. Walter was claiming damages, financial and personal, for her flight. "I have nothing to give you," she said. "No, what about him?" Walter's gaze shifted past her to where Cole was now walking toward them, having noticed the strange carriage. "Your employer, the man you're living with in sin. Perhaps he'd like to pay for the privilege of keeping you." "Leave him out of this." "Oh, but he's already in it, isn't he? The whole territory knows about your arrangement." Walter's smile was cold. "I could make things very difficult for him. A man who harbors a woman fleeing legal obligations, who lives in sin with her. Bad for business, bad for reputation." Cole reached them then, taking in the scene with quick assessment. His hand rested casual near his hip, where Lucy knew he kept a knife for ranch work. "Problem here?" he asked mildly. Mr. Thorne, I presume?" Walter extended his hand, which Cole ignored. "I'm Walter Langston. Miss Bellamy's intended." "Former intended," Lucy corrected sharply. "That remains to be seen." Walter lowered his unshaken hand. "I've come to retrieve what's mine. Don't see anything here that belongs to you," Cole said. Walter's eyes glittered. "She does, legally, morally, by every measure of civilized society. She made a promise. Her father made a promise. That carries weight in a court of law." "What do you want?" Lucy asked, though she feared she knew. "What I've always wanted. You return with me. Honor the engagement, and all this unpleasantness disappears. Refuse." He gestured at the legal papers. "And I'll pursue every legal remedy available. I'll sue for damages. I'll ensure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. I'll make certain you never find respectable employment anywhere in the territory." "She has employment," Cole said quietly. "Respectable employment. Walter repeated with a sneer. We both know there's nothing respectable about her position here. Cole moved then. Just a shift of weight. But Walter took a step back. I think you should leave, Cole said. Not without her. Then you'll be here a long time. Walter looked between them. Calculation in his eyes. You care for her, I can see that. So consider this, I have resources. Lawyers, influence, I can make your life difficult. Mr. Thorne. Lost contracts. Trouble with suppliers. Questions about your business practices. All of that goes away if she simply honors her obligation. My obligation was to my father, not to you, Lucy said, and I've more than paid his debts. The law can go hang. The words burst from her with unexpected force. I am not cattle to be bought and sold. I am not property to be claimed. I made no promise to you, signed no contract. My father's desperation is not my burden to bear. You little Walter reached for her arm. Cole's hand closed around his wrist before he could make contact. Don't! For a moment, they stood frozen. Walter's soft city grip caught in Cole's work-hardened grasp. Then Walter jerked free, rubbing his wrist. This isn't over, he said. I'll go to the sheriff. The mayor, You'll do what you need to. Cole interrupted. And so will we. But you'll do it from town, not here. This is private property, and you're no longer welcome. Walter's face flushed purple. You'll regret this, both of you. I'll see you in court. Lucy, and when I win, and I will win, you'll have no choice but to return. He climbed back into his carriage with as much dignity as he could muster. As it rolled away, Lucy felt her knees begin to shake. The paper in her hand seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Let me see, Cole said gently. She handed him the document. He read it slowly, his expression growing darker with each line. He can't force you to marry him, he said finally. No, but he can ruin me. More than I already am? She laughed, but it came out cracked. He can take what little I have. He can destroy your business, your reputation. Lucy! Cole caught her shoulders, turning her to face him. Look at me. She met his eyes reluctantly. He can try, Cole said firmly. But this is Dry Hollow, not some eastern city. We do things different here, and you're not facing this alone. I won't let you. Won't let me what stand by you, fight for you. Too late for that. His hands gentled on her shoulders. You chose to come here. I chose to take you in. We'll face whatever comes from those choices together. The tears came then, hot and sudden. Cole pulled her against his chest, and she let herself lean into his strength just for a moment. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but fear's just another kind of weather. It passes. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. What do we do? First, we talk to Samuel Hutchins. He's the closest thing to a lawyer in town. Then we prepare for a fight. He touched her cheek briefly. But right now, you finish that bread. I'll finish with the yearling. One task at a time. Lucy nodded, finding steadiness in the simple prescription. As Cole headed back to the pasture, she returned to the kitchen. The dough had overproofed, but she punched it down and shaped it anyway. Her hands shook at first, then steadied with the familiar work. Walter had found her. The past had caught up, but as she looked out the window at Cole working with quiet patience, she realized something had changed. She was no longer running. Whatever came next, she would stand and face it. The bread rose again in its pans, and Lucy built up the fire in the stove. Some things couldn't be controlled weather, the past, the judgment of others. But this she could do: make bread, tend house, stand firm. It would have to be enough. The town hall had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was filled, people standing along the walls, more peering through windows. Word of the hearing had spread like wildfire. The Eastern gentleman demanding his runaway bride face justice. the local rancher standing by her, the scandal of it all too delicious to miss. Lucy sat very straight beside Samuel Hutchins, the elderly man who served as Dry Hollow's legal counsel when needed. Her best dress, the blue one she'd worn that first day, had been pressed with careful attention. Her hair was pinned severely back. She looked, she hoped, respectable, serious, nothing like the fallen woman Walter painted her to be. Across the aisle, Walter sat with his hired lawyer from Denver, a sharp-faced man named Cornelius Webb, who wore his education like armor. Walter looked pleased with himself, confident in his righteousness and his money's power to purchase it. Cole sat behind Lucy, close enough that she could feel his presence like warmth at her back. He'd wanted to pay for a proper lawyer from the territorial capital, but she'd refused. This was her fight. She would face it with what resources she had. Mayor Jameson, brother to the store owner, called the room to order. This wasn't a formal court, but the nearest circuit judge was weeks away, and Walter had demanded immediate action. The mayor would hear arguments and make a preliminary ruling. Mr. Webb. The mayor nodded to Walter's lawyer. Present your case. Webb stood, adjusting his silk vest. Gentlemen and ladies, he added with a condescending nod to the few women present. This is a simple matter of contract law and common decency. Miss Lucy Bellamy was engaged to Mr. Walter Langston. The engagement was announced publicly. Preparations were made, expenses incurred. Then, without warning or cause, Miss Bellamy fled in the night, abandoning her obligations and causing my client considerable embarrassment and financial loss. He produced papers receipts for wedding preparations, statements from Millbrook citizens about the engagement, documentation of debts that Walter claimed to have forgiven in anticipation of the marriage. Furthermore, Webb continued, his voice rising, Miss Bellamy has added insult to injury by taking up residence with an unmarried man, living in a state of moral degradation that brings shame not only upon herself, but upon my client, whose name remains linked with hers in the public mind. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Mrs. Patterson nodded vigorously from the front row. We seek damages for breach of promise. Webb concluded, and we ask that Miss Bellamy be compelled to honor her engagement or face appropriate legal consequences. He sat down, looking satisfied. Mayor Jameson turned to Samuel Hutchins. Your response? The old lawyer rose slowly, his movements deliberate. Lucy had worried about his age, his simple clothes, his lack of Eastern education. But when he spoke, his voice carried surprising authority. Mr. Mayor, folks, he began. We don't dispute that there was talk of an engagement, but talk isn't law, and expectation is an obligation. I'd like to ask Mr. Webb, where's the contract Miss Bellamy signed? Where is her consent, written in her own hand? Webb stood. The father's consent. The father is dead, Samuel interrupted. And even when he lived, he had no legal right to promise away his adult daughter like a horse or a plot of land. This isn't medieval Europe. Mr. Webb, this is America. Here, women have the right to choose. She gave her word. Did she? Samuel turned to the crowd. Who here heard Lucy Bellamy promise to marry Walter Langston? Not her father's promise, not assumptions based on his debts, but her own words. Silence. I thought not, Samuel continued, because she never gave it. What happened was a desperate father trying to save his family from ruin, and a wealthy man taking advantage of that desperation. How dare you? Walter started to rise, but Webb pulled him down. Let me ask you all something, Samuel said, warming to his theme. If your daughter was told she had to marry a man 30 years her senior to pay your debts, what would you want her to do? Submit or run? That's not, Webb protested. Isn't it? Let's call this what it is, Mr. Langston wanted to purchase a young wife with her father's debt. When she refused to be bought, he followed her here to try again. And what of her current situation? Webb demanded. Living in sin with Mr. Thorne. I work for Mr. Thorne, Lucy said, standing suddenly. I cook, clean, and keep house. I sleep in my own room, earn my own wages, and conduct myself with propriety. If others choose to see sin where there is only honest labor, that's their failing, not mine. You see, Webb gestured dramatically. She admits to living with him. As his employee, Samuel corrected. Unless Mr. Webb is suggesting that every housekeeper in the territory is living in sin with her employer. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Mayor Jameson's mouth twitched. The damage to my client's reputation, Webb tried again, was caused by his own actions. Lucy interrupted, finding strength in anger. He chose to pursue a woman who didn't want him. He chose to make a spectacle of this. Any damage to his reputation comes from his own behavior, not mine. You little... Walter surged to his feet. In Mr. Langston. The mayor's gavel cracked down. You'll control yourself or be removed. Your Honor, Samuel said calmly. We see here the true character of the supposed injured party. A man who tries to force his will on a woman who has clearly refused him. Is this the kind of behavior we support in Dry Hollow? She owes me, Walter shouted. Her father owed me, someone has to pay. And there it is, Samuel said softly. Not love, not even wounded pride, just a demand for payment. Miss Bellamy is not currency, sir. She is a human being with the right to decide her own fate. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. Around her, she sensed the crowd's mood shifting. These were Western people, shaped by a land that demanded independence. The idea of forcing a woman into marriage sat uneasily with them, whatever they thought of her current situation. Miss Bellamy, the mayor said, do you wish to speak further? Lucy stood again, her legs steadier now. Yes, Your Honor, I do. The room quieted. I did not run from Mr. Langston out of caprice or cruelty, she said, her voice clear. I ran because marrying him would have been a lie to him, to myself, to any children we might have had. I chose poverty over that lie. I chose uncertainty over certain misery. She turned to face Walter directly. You say I owe you, perhaps by some measures. I do, but I have paid in full with my reputation, my comfort, my place in society. I work from dawn to dusk for wages that barely keep me. I face whispers and judgment every time I come to town. If that isn't payment enough for your embarrassment, then nothing will ever satisfy you. Walter's face had gone pale, then red. You self-righteous. Enough. The mayor's gavel came down hard. I've heard enough. Mr. Webb, Mr. Langston, you've failed to prove any legal obligation on Miss Bellamy's part. Talk of engagement is not a contract. Expectations are not obligations. And this territory does not enforce the purchase of wives through debt. This is outrageous, Webb protested. What's outrageous? The mayor continued. Is pursuing a woman across hundreds of miles because she chose not to marry you, Mr. Langston. I suggest you return to Millbrook and find a bride who actually wants you. Case dismissed. The crowd erupted talk, arguments, movement. Walter stood frozen, disbelief clear on his face. Webb gathered papers with sharp, angry movements. Lucy felt a hand on her elbow. Cole, steady as always. Come on, he murmured. Let's go. They made their way through the crowd, accepting a few nods of support, ignoring the disapproving glares. Outside, Lucy drew in deep breaths of desert air. You did well, Cole said quietly. Samuel did well. I just stood there. You stood up. That's what mattered. He helped her onto the wagon, then surprised her by taking her hand. I'm proud of you. The simple words undid her. The tears she'd held back in the hall came now, rolling silently down her cheeks. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. This part is, Cole agreed. Walter will leave. The talk will die down eventually. But Lucy, What you said in there about choosing poverty and uncertainty. She wiped her eyes. It's true. It doesn't have to stay true. He squeezed her hand, then released it to take up the reins. We'll talk more at home. For now. Just breathe. You won. As they drove away, Lucy looked back to see Walter emerge from the hall, his lawyer beside him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. For a moment, she almost pitied him. Then she remembered his grip on her arm, his assumption of ownership, and the pity faded. She had won. Not everything her reputation remained tattered, her future uncertain, but she had kept her freedom, her right to choose. In the end, that was victory enough. The letter arrived 3 days after the hearing, delivered by the same stage that had taken Walter Langston back east. Lucy recognized his precise handwriting on the envelope and nearly threw it into the stove unread. But curiosity won, as perhaps he'd known it would. She opened it while sitting at the kitchen table, morning coffee cooling beside her. Miss Bellamy, by the time you read this, I will be returning to Millbrook. I find the Western Territories unsuitable to my temperament and its people lacking in proper civilization. I wish you to know that I have withdrawn all legal claims against you, not from any change of heart, but because I now see clearly what I refused to acknowledge before you would never have made me happy. Nor I you. I wanted a wife who would be grateful for my rescue, who would manage my household and bear my children without question or complaint. You wanted something I could never give to be seen as yourself rather than as an extension of my will. I thought you too proud when you refused me. Perhaps you were, but I see now that I was proud too proud to court you properly, too proud to accept your refusal, too proud to see that debt and desperation make poor foundations for marriage. I will not apologize for seeking what I believed was my right, but I acknowledge that in pursuing you here, in trying to force what should be freely given, I diminished us both. May you find whatever it is you seek in that desolate place. W. Langston. Postscript. Your father spoke of you often in his final months. He was proud of your intelligence, your spirit, your kindness. Perhaps if I had listened to what he said instead of what I wanted to hear, we might have avoided this unfortunate chapter. Lucy read the letter twice, then set it aside with trembling hands. It wasn't an apology. Not quite. But it was an ending, clean and final. The man who had haunted her steps for months had finally let go. Bad news? Cole asked from the doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. No. She handed him the letter. Just unexpected. He read it quickly, his expression neutral. He's a better writer than he is a man. He's not evil, Lucy said slowly. Just limited. He saw what he wanted and tried to take it, like buying a horse or a piece of land. You're generous. No, just tired of carrying anger. She stood, moving to pour fresh coffee. It's done. Finally. Truly done. Cole was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been thinking. Something in his tone made her turn. He stood by the window, looking out at the ranch he'd built with his own hands. About what comes next, for you. He turned to face her. The talk in town will die down eventually, but your reputation won't recover. Not fully. You'll always be the woman who lived at the Thorn Ranch. I know. She kept her voice steady, though his words stung. I've accepted that. Have you? He moved closer. Lucy, you're young, educated. You could go somewhere else. Start fresh. I'd write you a reference. Say you kept house for my sister or some such. You could find respectable employment, maybe even marry if you wanted. Lucy set down her cup carefully, afraid she might break it. Are you dismissing me? What? No. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I'm trying to give you choices, real ones, not just the lesser of evils. I see. But she didn't. Not really. And what if I said I don't want to leave? Then I'd say you're not thinking clearly. This life, the isolation, the hard work, the judgment, it's not what you were raised for. Neither was fleeing in the night or facing down creditors in court, but I managed those. Lucy! No. The word came out sharper than intended. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Not you, not Walter, not anyone. I've spent my entire life having men tell me what's best for me. I'm done with it. Silence stretched between them. Cole looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. You're right, he said finally. I apologize. The apology, simple and sincere, deflated her anger. I know you mean well, but Cole, I need you to understand I'm here by choice. Every morning I wake up and choose to stay. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because... She paused, searching for words. Because this is where I want to be. Why? The question was soft, almost vulnerable. Lucy thought of all the reasons she could give. The honest work, the wide skies, the freedom from society's expectations. All true, but not the whole truth. Because you see me, she said finally. Not as a problem to solve or a scandal to weather or a prize to win, just me. Do you know how rare that is? Cole was very still, his eyes never leaving her face. Lucy. And because I see you too, she continued, courage building with each word. The way you are with the horses, patient, gentle. The way you've treated me with respect, with kindness, without asking for anything in return. The way you sat by my bed all night when I was sick, even though I asked you not to watch me sleep. A smile ghosted across his face. You were delirious and stubborn. I'm always stubborn. Yes, he agreed. You are. They stood there, the kitchen bright with morning sun. Everything changing and nothing changing all at once. If you stay, Cole said carefully, things can't continue as they are. The talk will never die if we keep this arrangement. Your reputation is already ruined. We established that. It could be repaired, partially, if... He stopped, took a breath. If we married. The words hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Lucy's heart hammered against her ribs. Is that a proposal? It's a practical solution. Marriage would silence the worst of the gossip. Give you protection, legal and social. You could stay without... Stop! Lucy held up a hand. Just stop. Cole frowned. You thought you'd offer me another business arrangement. Like Walter did, only with better terms. The hurt was sharp as a blade. Thank you, but I've had enough of practical marriages. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He crossed to her in 2 strides, catching her hands in his. I meant that I want you to stay, not as my housekeeper, not as my employee, as my wife. Because it's practical. Because I love you. The words came out rough, unpracticed. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I'm drowning. Because when you stood up in that courtroom and declared your right to choose, I wanted to be the one you chose. Lucy's vision blurred. Cole. But I won't be another man trying to trap you with obligation. If you stay, if we marry, it has to be because you want it. Not because you need shelter or protection or respectability. Because you choose it. Choose me. She looked at their joined hands, his scarred and strong. Hers work-roughened but steady. Thought of all the mornings she'd made his coffee, all the evenings they'd sat in comfortable silence, all the small moments that had built something larger than either had expected. I already have, she whispered. I choose you. I choose this place. I choose whatever comes next, as long as we face it together. Cole's smile transformed his weathered face. Even the gossip, the hard work, the isolation. Even Mrs. Patterson's disapproval. Well, let's not go too far. Lucy laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Ask me properly then. If we're doing this, I want the words. Cole released her hands only to frame her face gently. Lucy Bellamy, will you marry me not because it's practical or proper, but because I love you and want to build a life with you? Yes, the word came easy as breathing. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, sweet and careful, like she was something precious. When they parted, Lucy felt as though the world had shifted into new alignment. When? She asked. Soon as we can arrange it, unless you want time to… No. She thought of white dresses and church ceremonies, of all the proprieties she'd left behind. No waiting, no fuss, just us, making promises we mean to keep. Tomorrow, then, we'll go to town, find the justice of the peace. The town that's been gossiping about us for months. Let them see that sometimes scandal has a happy ending. Lucy smiled, feeling wild and free and utterly certain. All right then, tomorrow. They stood there in the morning light, holding each other, while outside the ranch came alive with its daily rhythms. There would be consequences to face, adjustments to make, a life to build together. But for now, for this perfect moment, there was only choice, freely made and gladly given. The letter from Walter still lay on the table, already irrelevant. The past had released its claim. The future spread before them like the desert horizon, vast, challenging, full of possibility. Lucy Bellamy had fled one life to find another. Tomorrow, she would choose a third, and this time, she would choose it with her whole heart. 3 months had passed since the simple ceremony at the Justice of the Peace. Spring was trying to assert itself over the desert, bringing wildflowers that bloomed briefly and brilliantly before the heat claimed them. Lucy Thorne now. A name that still felt new on her tongue stood at the kitchen window watching storm clouds build on the horizon. The ranch had changed in small ways since their marriage. Curtains at the windows, flowers in a jar on the table, a second rocking chair on the porch. But the rhythms remained the same: early mornings, hard work, quiet evenings. The difference was in the details: shared glances over breakfast, Cole's hand finding hers as they sat watching sunsets, the bedroom door that no longer separated them at night. The rain started just after supper, gentle at first, then building to a steady downpour. Lucy had learned to love desert rain, the way it brought the smell of sage and creosote, the way it turned the hard-packed earth to temporary rivers, the way it washed everything clean. She was mending one of Cole's shirts when the fever hit. One moment, she was fine. The next, she was shivering despite the warmth of the stove. The needle slipped from her fingers. Lucy! Cole looked up from the ledger he'd been reviewing. You all right? Just tired. But even as she said it, she knew it was more. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and her skin felt too tight. Cole was beside her in an instant, hand on her forehead. You're burning up. It's nothing. I just need… But what she needed was lost as the world went gray at the edges. She heard Cole calling her name, felt him lift her, but everything was becoming distant and strange. She woke in their bed, blankets piled high despite the heat radiating from her body. Rain drummed on the roof, and thunder rolled across the desert like wagon wheels. Cole sat beside her, a cool cloth in his hand. There you are, he said softly, bathing her face. You scared me. Sorry, her voice came out cracked. How long? Few hours. Fever's still high, but you're coherent. That's good. Lucy tried to sit up, but he pressed her gently back. Rest. Dr. Morrison's coming in the morning if the roads aren't washed out. Don't need a doctor. Just need… She lost the thought, distracted by how the lamplight made patterns on the wall. Pretty patterns, like flowers or faces. Lucy, stay with me. She focused on his voice, used it as an anchor. I'm here, just drifting. Cole took her hand, held it firmly. Then I'll keep you moored. Time became fluid. Sometimes she was fully present, aware of Cole's steady presence, the rain on the roof, the ache in her bones. Other times she drifted to other places: her father's church, the stagecoach west, That first morning, she'd walked to find Cole. At some point, hours later days, she became aware that the rain had stopped and morning light filled the room. Cole was still there, still in the same chair, looking haggard. "Have you been here all night?" she whispered. His head came up sharply. "You're awake, really awake." "I think so. Everything's clearer." She tried to push herself up, found she could manage it. "You look terrible." "You look beautiful." He pressed his hand to her forehead. "Fever's broken, thank God." "I told you not to watch me sleep." The words came automatically. A weak attempt at their old joke. Cole's laugh was shaky. "And I told you I was just being here in case you needed anything. Seems we're both stubborn about our positions." Lucy leaned back against the pillows, exhausted but clear-headed. Through the window, she could see the desert sparkling with moisture, every rock and plant sharp-edged in the clean light. "I'm all right," she said, "truly." "You will be." He brought her water, helped her drink. "But you're staying in bed today. No arguments." "Cole." "No arguments," he repeated firmly. "I've spent 2 nights wondering if I was going to lose you just when I'd found you. Let me be overcautious for once." The raw emotion in his voice stopped her protest. She caught his hand, brought it to her cheek. "You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn for that." "Good." He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "Be stubborn a while longer." The morning passed quietly. Cole brought her broth, sat with her while she ate, told her about the ranch work that needed doing but could wait. The ordinary words were a comfort, a promise that life would continue, that this was just another storm weathered. By afternoon, Lucy felt strong enough to sit in the chair by the window. The desert was already drying, but the rain had left its mark, tiny flowers beginning to open, the air still sweet with moisture. "It's beautiful," she said. "What is—" Cole had been dozing in the other chair, exhausted from his vigil. "All of it. The desert after rain. This room. You." He smiled, the expression soft with relief and love. "The fever's made you sentimental." "No, just grateful." She looked around the simple room that had become home. "Do you remember what you said? That I came here already broken and you were giving me room to mend?" "I remember." "I think I have mended. I mean, not back to what I was, but into something new, something stronger." Cole moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands. "You were always strong. You just needed to see it for yourself." "Maybe, but I needed this place, this life, you, to find that strength." She touched his face, traced the familiar scar. "Thank you for watching over me. Then and now." "Always," he promised. "Though I prefer when you're awake to complain about it." Lucy laughed, feeling life flow back into her limbs. "Don't watch me sleep," she said, but the words were warm with affection. "I'm not watching," he replied, their old refrain. "I'm just keeping guard so you can rest easy." Outside, clouds were building again on the horizon. There would be more storms, more challenges, more whispers from town about the minister's daughter who'd chosen scandal over safety. But here in this room, with rain-washed light falling across the floor and Cole's hand warm in hers, Lucy felt only peace. She'd run from one life, worked for another, chosen a third. Each transformation had required courage she hadn't known she possessed. But perhaps that was the secret, not knowing your own strength until circumstances demanded it, not recognizing love until it sat patiently beside your sickbed, not understanding home until you'd built it with your own hands. "Rest now," Cole said, helping her back to bed. "I'll be here." "I know." Lucy closed her eyes, no longer afraid of vulnerability. "You always are." The rain started again as evening fell, gentle and steady. Lucy dozed and woke, always finding Cole nearby reading, mending harness, simply sitting, watching over her without watching. protecting without constraining, loving without demanding. This was what she'd run toward without knowing it, not just freedom from an unwanted marriage, but freedom to choose her own bonds. The freedom to say, "Don't watch me sleep," while secretly treasuring every moment he did exactly that. As night deepened and the rain continued its patient work of transforming the desert, Lucy Thorne nee Bellamy drifted into healing sleep. Her fever was gone, her strength returning, her heart at peace. Tomorrow she would rise and resume the work of living, cooking, cleaning, learning the ways of horses and weather and marriage. But tonight she rested, and Cole sat beside her in the lamplit darkness, keeping watch, keeping faith, keeping love. Some storms, she thought drowsily, were worth weathering. Some watchers worth trusting. Some choices worth every consequence that followed. And as sleep finally claimed her, she whispered one more time, soft as rainfall, "Don't watch me sleep." His answer came quiet as desert wind. "I'm not watching. I'm just here, always here." It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to this story of love and courage in the Old West. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Lucy and Cole's journey. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these frontier stories of the heart. Until next time, partners.